Sharam, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to get a chance to come on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So I'm really fascinated to chat to you. I do feel like a lot of people who listen to this podcast will be familiar with the general concepts of CGMs, but we can go into them a bit. But of course, the whole conversation around weight loss, weight management is just changing so insanely over the last 6 months, years, 2 years, isn't it? That must change how people see your product as an alternative to GLP-1s, I guess.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. The world has changed so much, and just the conversation has changed so much. And I think what's interesting is when you see what's going on in the market and some of the excitement around what's possible and what's happening is we're forgetting the fact that 75% of us, of American adults, are now overweight or obese. It's one of
Mm.
the arguably the worst problem and arguably one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and yet this problem has persisted for decades. And so the excitement around having a solution that can help more and more people is very powerful. And frankly, GLP-1s are really an exceptional tool, and they're actually complementary to what Signos does. And happy to talk more about all that.
Yeah. Well, why don't you start by telling us what Signos does exactly?
Yeah, happy to. So really, what we're focused on is tackling the obesity epidemic here in America. And a little bit of the background. I grew up as an obese kid in my early years, and I fluctuated between that and being in shape and being obese again. And so my parents, when I was younger, threw me in a bunch of sports. I got half decent at hockey. Went to college to play, and from there, what was interesting is, the part of the story that I skip over generally is having the potential opportunity to go play in the NHL versus going off into the working world and joining a startup. But even 6 7 years ago, I was obese again. So like many Americans, just up and down and up and down on that weight spectrum. And the thing that was frustrating was, and I experienced this in particular in college. They'd say, "Hey, Sharam, you're the same height, weight, age, gender as your teammate over here. We have this so dialed in. We'll put you both on this specific caloric number that is your goal, 2,540, calories a day or whatever it might be. And at the end of the day, we'd eat the same three meals in the same three quantities and do the same on ice or plyometric workout. And I would gain a half pound. My friend would lose a half pound. We'd repeat all of that the exact same the next day and have a different outcome. And meanwhile, I'd have a number of my teammates eating 5,000 calories a day, not gaining a pound, and it drove me nuts. And so seeing how our bodies were so different, responded so differently, was something that's really stuck in my brain. It's just, only calorie counting for so long clearly missed an aspect of our metabolism and sleep and all the different other aspects that they go into this. And so, the traditional nutrition advice assumes everyone's metabolism works the same, and it doesn't. If you eat something after having slept for 9 hours last night, your body's going to process it, and you'll have a different outcome than if you slept for 1 or 2 hours last night. And that factor, there's about 50 different factors that go into that: sleep and stress and exercise and food, and just in food, the order you eat the food in, how long it takes for you to consume that. All of these aspects together play a part. So we really at Signos set out to show that real-time personalized feedback on the impact of food and exercise and stress and sleep could make people create these sustainable, healthy life changes. And so we're really focused on how do we position Signos as the differentiated platform that drives behavior change. And it's really not just simply wearing a CGM or wearing a smartwatch. It's integrating these actual insights to help users modify their behavior and really reinforcing those outcomes that require this guided intervention. And so that's the goal. And so we combine this FDA-cleared CGM technology with a behavior change system, and that's what we are really excited about.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the FDA clearance in a sec, because that's pretty cool. And obviously, people who listen to this podcast, we're already quite on board with tracking, and I think CGMs is like the ultimate extension of that. For example, the Oura Ring gives the geek so much data. And I guess what I'm fascinated by with you guys is that you're obviously making a real attempt to make the data as actionable as possible. And I told you before we started recording, I first used a CGM 10 years ago. I was basically trying to figure it out all on my own. What does that mean? And now you've got pretty dashboards now, haven't you?
Yeah, we try to make it a little easier so it's not as you don't require the PhD in statistics that you might have needed a couple decades ago. So really the goal is, how do we help you drive these behavioral changes? How do we reduce the friction required? It's hard enough trying to lose weight as it is, and you feel like you're not in control and it's a struggle. It's how do we remove all of the friction as much as possible associated with this to make this as easy of a process as possible. And so what we've really tried to change or really bring into the forefront is the fact that we're going to show you how your body reacts, how your metabolism reacts. We're going to show you how that changes throughout the day, throughout the hour, throughout the week. We're going to show you how that intersects with the exercise you might be doing, or your favorite foods that you might be consuming. And there's a reason why we all feel like we have a friend that walks by a Cinnabon and walks by and just smells the thing and feels like they gain weight. We all have friends that walk in and eat whatever they want and feel like they don't gain a pound. And it's like, why is that the case? And it doesn't just boil down to genetics. And it's like, hey, how can we help you act more like one of those than the other? And I think too many of us are stuck where we feel like our metabolisms are not set up in a way, or we're not optimizing them in the right way for our bodies.
Yeah. I'm trying to put on muscle at the moment, but that'll probably annoy a lot of people. I'm not trying to lose weight; I'm trying to gain weight. but it's so hard. To be honest, I should use one of your Signos efforts again, because to be honest, that would probably really help me try and figure out how to put on weight as well. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge, I can tell you.
It's a challenge when you try to take your weight in any direction and then keep it there. And I think that's what makes this. I think that's what conceptually makes this novel, which is, I think everyone at some point in their life has been able to successfully gain or lose weight. I think everyone's been able to successfully lose a couple pounds here or successfully gain a couple pounds there if that's their goal. I think the problem that we've all faced is, how do you do that and then keep that off? And I think that is really the hardest piece, because if you look at some of the GLP-1 stuff that we've been talking about, the data is showing that the average person gains that weight back within 12 to 18 months. A lot of the weight gain you gain back when you're doing it sort of on your own comes back, but it's a lot longer period of time. And so really, I think the key is on the weight management journey. It's how do you help lose the weight and keep that off? That is the key.
Yeah. And that brings us, this is biohacking news after all. And that was the first story that I wanted to look at. This, the last few days, you just referenced it, in Cambridge, people regain on average 60% of their lost weight within a year of stopping GLP-1 drugs. And the regained weight may be disproportionately fat rather than muscle, potentially leaving people worse off than before they started. You're offering the exit plan, basically, aren't you? From that.
I think, and you bring up a great point. And those stats get worse if you go beyond just 12 months. If you go out to 18 months, they get even worse. And I think the reality is as we look at helping Americans and people across the world, it's, how do we teach you how to fish? How do we teach you the behavior change? And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the point of a surgery or a point of a drug is it doesn't teach behavior change. It's not what they do. And so when you look at the clinical studies for GLP-1 drugs, for example, it's used in conjunction with diet and exercise. And I think in the real world, a lot of folks will not do those pieces, and they'll lose some weight, and half of it will be muscle and half of it will be fat, and then they'll gain the weight back and they won't gain that muscle back. And so the key is, it's not whether GLP-1s are great or terrible. GLP-1s are a really powerful tool, but it's how do you wrap that in a solution or a system that ensures that they drive the right level of efficacy for you, but also ensure that you can maintain that level of success when you ultimately want to get off that. And that is where I think the uniqueness and the key of how Signos can help is, we can provide that diet and exercise wrapper by ensuring that we can teach the individual what works for their metabolism. And then you can also use that to see how your metabolism is getting optimized when you're on that drug, for example, when you're on the GLP-1. So I think there's a whole host of ways that we've seen some real success, whether you're using that at the beginning of a journey, whether you're using that with a GLP-1, or whether you're using that to graduate off the GLP-1.
Yeah. You're being very diplomatic about GLP-1, so it's very impressive. But I guess you're going mainstream, aren't you? You've got to tick all the boxes for people.
Well, I think GLP-1s are a powerful tool, and I'm not here to knock them and say, you know, people should or shouldn't take them. I would argue, of course, that GLP-1s are designed for a particular comorbidity with a certain BMI, and if you have 5 pounds to lose, that, you know, you should not be on a GLP-1. I think everyone would agree with that. But the reality is they can give you a bit of a jump start, and as you go through this experience, all of us want to make sure that we are getting our best bang for the buck. We're spending the money on the GLP-1, and we want to make sure we have the level of efficacy that we're excited about. We want to make sure that we keep that success that we managed, that hard-won success that we managed to get with the drug. And so whether you decide to take the GLP-1 or not, Signos is a great solution independent of or with a GLP-1.
Yeah. And there's an amazing stat you've got. 85.7% of your members report weight loss within the first 30 days. That's absolutely amazing. And what I'm quite surprised about with that is when you're thinking about something like Ozempic, it doesn't require anything. You just take it and then, you know, you just wait. But actually you are asking people to pay attention as well. So that's very impressive.
Yeah. So, you know, when the GLP-1 goes through this process, it's helping change the appetite, but the metabolic education changes the behavior. And so we're really supporting the education, the sustainability during and after the medication use, and to teach those metabolic habits, if you will. And if we don't understand how specific foods, how meal timing, how movement affects our bodies, we're going to default back to the old patterns as soon as that appetite returns or as soon as we get off the medication, because we don't have the proper weight management plan. And so many of us that are on GLP-1s lack the guidance on the fuel or on the lean mass or the nutrient sufficiency. And so you could even face undereating or muscle loss as a result of some of those pieces. And so really, as you think about this, it's less about whether to use one or the other. I think it's the decision is up to the individual, but it's really around how do we make sure that you have the support system? How do we make sure you have the wrap around your metabolism where you can understand how to optimize it, whether you're on this or not, and then you can use that for the rest of your life. It's almost like it's the first solution that's designed to not keep you on forever, and that's it. Yeah, sort of angle or an approach. It's helping you throughout the journey, and how do we help you maintain that throughout?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people in our world do like to use CGMs for all sorts of different reasons. I know you gained weight recently and used that opportunity to test your own product. What happened?
Yeah. So this is a story I haven't told very often. I actually went through the experience of gaining the weight back. And for context, for folks that don't know, I was the first person on Signos, of course, and lost a bunch of weight on it. And as I was going through this experience, I was like, oh, this is amazing to be able to do this, or what about this, or how does this work? And so I started coming up with, oh, this is the product, this is the feature, this is the next thing, this is the next iteration we should start building. And pretty soon, when you're far enough divorced away from the moment you lost that weight, you forget the friction that how easy or how hard it was. And so some of the things that I would suggest, I'd say, oh, this thing seems like a great idea. Of course, this would work. And things that other people would suggest, it's like, oh, that might be too simple. People might not do it. And you quickly start to realize once you go in, you don't have the appreciation of whether someone will actually do it or not until you're sort of quote unquote dog fooding your own product. And so for me, because my weight fluctuated throughout growing up, it was actually not very difficult to gain the weight back. Although it was in the early days more fun because I really started to eat whatever I could to gain the weight back. But after a certain point, you're like, all right, this is clearly now a job when you're trying to actively gain the weight back. It takes the fun away from it. The reason I brought that up is when you're going through that experience, and I put myself on that journey a second time, I quickly realized some of these things that seem really powerful or too complicated. There's too much friction involved. There's too much effort. And some of the things that seem simple, where it almost seemed like the technology and the AI were baked into the user interface to make it as simple as possible. actually ended up performing better. And you don't have that appreciation until you go through that experience. So that really helped from a dog fooding perspective to do that.
Yeah. Wow. That's real commitment to the cause. Well done. That's great. This is a sort of, news-based show, and something that people have been talking about a lot on social media recently is the McDonald's boss eating a hamburger. You've seen that, right?
I've seen it.
You guys should do a mock-up of that, but with someone wearing a CGM at the same time, and then share the results.
Like, he's getting a lot of flack for that, the size of the bite.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I like that idea, though. I like that advertising idea.
Yeah, it's good. You can have that one for free.
Thank you.
Now, what I think you just mentioned a few moments ago, 75% of Americans are overweight. That's basically everyone, isn't it? I mean, I suppose it's sort of quite scary, quite exciting for what you're doing. It's just amazing, isn't it, really? And I don't know the figures for the rest of the world. It's probably a little bit less than America, but quite a lot. And this podcast is about, sort of about 50% US, 50% UK, and the rest around the world as well. But it's just an amazing number, isn't it?
Yeah, it is staggering. It is scary for sure, given how large that number is. And the rest of the world is catching up very quickly. And around major cities and large countries and countries that aren't even that large are really starting to catch up with this obesity epidemic and this joint epidemic around type 2 diabetes. And so you're now starting to see in the United States, 88 million US adults have prediabetes. And the scariest part is more than 80% of them are unaware that they have prediabetes. And so I think if you combine that with the fact that many of us are shocked by foods we assumed were healthy, actually are spiking our glucose levels, it's a recipe for a bit of a disaster. And if you think about this, when you go to a restaurant and you say, I'm gonna eat healthy, I'm gonna order a big salad, and then you come back and you're like, oh, I gained some weight, I wonder why that is. And if you were to look at the data with Signos, that would have helped you identify, like, oh, you had a big glucose spike. Why was that? It turns out the dressing and the salad had a ton of sugar in it. And, you don't know that. And you think you're eating healthy. You think you're doing the right thing. And then you struggle against that journey and feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill as you say, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing, but don't see the corresponding results. And so it's half the battle is figuring out, how do I know what I'm putting in my body? How does that fit with my metabolism? But the other half of it is, how do we make sure that we give you the right behavioral change to figure out what to do at the right time? It's not our goal is not to put everyone on a keto diet. That is not sustainable from a long-term perspective. It's how do we figure out the right foods, the right carbs for you that fit your body. And they'll be different. And we see this all the time. Someone will have oatmeal and they'll have a huge spike, and someone else's metabolism will have oatmeal and their body's almost flat. And so and they could be the same, individual in terms of the height and the weight and the age and all of that, and their metabolism is different and process that differently, and it corresponds to a lot of different factors. And so giving the knowledge to know and then figuring out what to do about it, so it's not just, oh, let's remove those things. It's like, hey, how can we help you go for a walk? How can we help you swap out the worst performing thing in that concoction of 6 things you had for breakfast? How do we figure out how to blunt the absorption of that? There's a host of things that we're going to help you as that journey, to ensure that as you're going through it, you feel like you have that support, and then we can nudge you along at the right moment.
You mentioned keto. I was keto for about a year and a half, and looking back, it didn't really suit me, but it was quite interesting. And I think when I first used to CGM, I think I was sort of low carbish. And one of the things I found very interesting, and I've never really had a chance to discuss it, but you're the perfect person to ask, is that at the time I was working in TV at Sky, and I would go in the evenings and be working in the evenings and have a canteen evening meal, what I thought was lowish carb in the evening. And it would really spike. At times, it would spike my glucose levels. And I started to figure out, I think what it was they were cooking the carrots and the vegetables and a lot of seed oils. Is that something that you've seen as a thing or not? Because it felt to me that was a thing, but I haven't actually spoken to anyone else who's noticed that wearing a CGM.
Yeah, there's a number of things that could go or factor into this. And so without knowing exactly what you ate, it's hard to make the comment. A couple things could play a part. One is when you are on a keto diet fairly strictly, and you're having instead of having no carbs, you're on low carb or having a low carb meal. That could have an effect. Another thing is when you have that meal. And so you'll start to see this, and this is really interesting, which is if you have a meal right before you go to sleep, and let's say there's some carbs in that meal, and then you go right to bed, your glucose spike will be very different than if you ate that same exact meal for breakfast. A traditional spike is going up and is going down over 1 to 2 hours, right? Over a couple hour period, let's say. If you were to eat that meal that we just described right before you bed, you go to sleep, your body essentially shuts down and you're not using that excess glucose. And so your glucose stays fairly high in the bloodstream for a lot longer period of time. And we've looked at this data. So again, it depends on what you ate, but we see situations where someone eats, goes to bed, their glucose spike stays high for almost 8 hours, comes back down as their body starts to wake up, or the dawn effect occurs, the dawn phenomenon. And at that point, what's happening is they wake up and they didn't feel like they had a good sleep, of course. They felt very unrested, if you will. But the other thing is if they were to go and measure their lab work that morning, their lab work would come back and be like, oh, you're everything's good. Everything looks pretty flat. Everything looks healthy. And you don't realize for the 8 hours at night, you just really, really did not do favors for your body. You had a terrible sleep, but the lab work says, everything's great. And so you're just missing that key window. So that's another possibility. And the third one is how alcohol factors in and affects how your body processes that food. And it often will cause a delayed glucose spike if you consume alcohol. And so what generally would happen when you have food and you have your body process that and you have a glucose spike, whether it's 30 minutes later or an hour later or an hour and a half later, with alcohol, it could be 3 or 4 hours later. So that plays a part as well. Of course, I'm just guessing at what you ate, and you could have had one of those things, but those are all different factors that can go into how your body might have a response that is different than.
And this might be a little bit hippy dippy, but actually, as you know, because I know you've done plenty of TV appearances yourself, it's quite a stressful environment. And I used to do a lot of evenings and late nights. And it wasn't like I was relaxing at home with friends, having a lovely slow digestion. I was hunched over my food, scooping it in before going back to the TV studio and staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning. That's not an optimal condition for digestion, for recovery, or for just sort of eating a meal in a healthy way, which could be interesting.
That is a great point as well. And that's another one, which is if you were to have the exact same meals throughout the day or the week or whatever, and instead of consuming them at a rapid pace, instead of, let's say, 5, 10, 15 minutes, you consume them over a 45-minute period or an hour, you would lower your glucose automatically without changing what you ate, just by slowing down how quickly you're eating. And it's really interesting because all of these things that we've been told by our parents to do when we were kids, like don't eat late at night, right before you go to bed, chew your food slower, eat your leafy greens first before you eat the rest of your meal. All of these things you see in the data, but for many of us, we do not do those things that we were told to do. And it's not until the moment at which you see how it affects your body in real time that you decide you want to make the change, because you feel like you're in control and it's not someone telling you what to do. It's your decision. And that's really where it gets pretty exciting. It's like, how do we give you the agency to realize you're in control and make the decision? And here's how it affects your body. And here's a small tweak you can make to optimize that. And I think you just highlighted a great point, which is the speed at which you eat is a really important factor for how your body is going to start processing that glucose and have a huge spike.
Yeah. And so do your members, do they wear a CGM all the time, or do they sort of cycle 14 days on, 14 days off?
And it depends on what your goal is. Generally, when someone starts Signos, they're on it 24/7 till they hit their weight loss goal. And then folks will, it depends how many pounds they have to lose. But once they hit their weight loss goal, then it's about how do we maintain and keep that weight off that we've been successful to hit. At that point, it's up to the individual. Some people want the 24/7, continuing that trajectory, and others are like, hey, I want to maintain this, and so can I have it? Can I wear it every other time? And so they'll wear it, like we just talked about, or a couple weeks on, weeks off. And so I think it really depends on the individual and how much they feel like they want to have that support as they go to maintain, because it's the two pieces like we talked about. It's losing the weight and then keeping it off.
Yeah. Now, Sharam, our second news story is that John Hopkins said recently that people without diabetes, those without diabetes, CGMs are actually not necessarily that helpful. What they said was evidence is scant for their use. And I thought it'd be very interesting because obviously you've run a 35,000 people through a clinical trial. You've got FDA clearance as well. Somebody's right. So I wonder what you thought about that, because it's very interesting, and obviously a lot of people in our world do like CGMs. What do you think of that study?
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why we did our study is when I started the company many years ago, there were a lot of studies on how CGM affects, how you can look at that to affect glucose, and everyone knows how glucose and insulin are interrelated. And so some of the data that connected everything all throughout didn't exist back then. And so as we were starting the company, we made a conscious decision to say, how can we create this company in a way that has a level of clinical rigor that hasn't existed before? How do we do a clinical study with tens and tens of thousands of people as part of this to look at the connection between glucose and weight, or metabolism and weight, and figure out how to optimize for that? And so that was something that we got really excited about in the early days, because that data, if you were on the tape 10 years ago, wasn't as prevalent. Over time, more and more data has occurred. But I think our study is one of the largest to look at that. And we're actually going to be releasing those results this year as we put that together. So excited to come back and talk to you about it when that's available.
Yeah. And it's occurred to me in the past that CGMs at the moment, obviously glucose related, but what you could do with a device like yours is measure quite a lot of other stuff as well. I don't know, is that a possibility for the future? Because presumably, if you can put a device in, a little pinprick in someone's arm and it sit there for 14 days and read blood measurements, it could do other stuff as well as be a CGM.
It certainly can. And so number of CGM manufacturers are working on what's called a multi-analyte solution that involves going beyond just glucose measurements. I think that is something that is potentially particularly interesting. And it really depends, though, on the goal and the outcome you're trying to drive. And so that extra analyte, or those extra analytes, will be a function of what's the outcome that you are focused on. But yeah, right now there are multiple companies that are working on that today.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, I guess if that sort of technology does come to pass, you guys are in a pretty good place to take advantage of it.
Yes, we're excited when that is available, and we'll be thrilled to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So what about your personal routines? And obviously, I'm guessing that you wear a CGM yourself, maybe not all the time, maybe some of the time. But what about your sort of biohacking routines and your general sort of health-related routines? What does your day-to-day look like? And what have you learned through your role, which might have influenced your day-to-day routine?
Yeah, there's a number of things. And this sort of ties into the earlier question you were asking, which is, are CGMs useful for the non-diabetic? And when I started the company, the short answer to that question was, we're going to find out, because most people didn't have an answer. They didn't know what was going to happen when you put a CGM on a non-diabetic, because people hadn't done it before. And it turns out you have pretty wild spikes. And I tested a lot of this stuff personally, and we see it across the tens and tens of thousands of members that were in the clinical trial. When you look across 35,000 people, you really quickly start to see a lot of really interesting data. But like for me personally, when I would have cereal with milk, and I wasn't appreciating how terrible some of these cereals that children have today really are. And you'll start to see a spike where, I'd be at a baseline of 100 and I'd spike to 200 milligrams per deciliter, which, by the way, if I was to go into an ER and present myself at that level or that high of a spike, they'd say, oh, this person probably has diabetes. And so it's such a high level.
Wow.
You don't appreciate it. You're just like, oh, there's some sugar in the cereal. It's a sugary cereal. Maybe the kid shouldn't have it. You don't realize how some of those, in that example, has such a huge impact on your body, how it processes that, and then you start to see what happens when your body's spiking, and your body releases insulin to bring that glucose in the bloodstream back down, and then you have this overcorrection because your body spikes so quickly, and so now you have the opposite hormone starting to get released, glucagon, and then it sort of ping pongs your glucose up and down because the spike was so severe that your body was not expecting that. And so those are examples where, again, going back to the initial question, you have people realizing CGM for non-diabetics can have a huge impact because you can see that in real time, and now you can start to figure out and help change behavior. In that example, I would say a lot of people inherently know that the cereal, the really bad cereal, the sugary cereal that we talk about, people generally shouldn't have.
So you've thrown out the Fruit Loops then?
I've thrown out the Fruit Loops. So there's a lot of different Fruit Loop alternatives now that you can get. The Fruit Loops are gone. But you see the other example I gave, which is you go out and you have that salad and you think you're being healthy. So in these cases, like one you understand is bad, but you don't know how bad it is. And the other one you think is healthy and don't realize that it was unhealthy. And it's being able to uncover those that you're realizing, like, this could have a huge impact in how I change my day. And it has a huge impact on our customers because they see the behavior. And just, again, telling someone to go, you buried in the back of a food label somewhere is the nutrition facts, and buried in the bottom, you can go look at the sugar and the carbs. But even in there, you don't know how it affects your metabolism. And so there is no better way than putting that right in front of you to see in real time how that affects. And that's why I think this technology is so powerful. And it's not just, let's just put a CGM on someone and just magically they're going to be on their weight management journey. It's you have to surround that with technology that's helping them understand that they don't need a PhD in statistics to figure out what to do at the right time and at the right moment to help drive that behavior. So for me, that one was a very obvious one. Another one was the walking after a meal. It doesn't have to be, oh, you got to do a full workout after a meal, but just something very subtle or something very simple where it's a nice time to spend with your spouse after dinner. Anyway, or to take the family on the walk. We started doing these family walks after, with my wife and the kids. And it's just a great thing to do with the whole family as well. And so you start to think about, these are the things we can optimize combined with what can I eat in advance of that. And so now having the salad in advance of the meal, instead of just saying, let's just dive into the meal. And so you start to see how this affects your own metabolism. And now you can make these changes because it's not just for you, for the longevity of the weight loss benefit and for the kids, but also you can see what you're going to put in front of your children. And hopefully you can give them a healthier world as well.
Are you cooling your rice yet before you eat it?
I have started cooling the rice. I think that is a great
That's a good one.
standpoint. A lot of times we will have cooled rice. Just because
it's tasty. It tastes so good when it's cool as well. Sharam, it's really, really great to chat. It has made me think. I'm gonna give it another go. It's been a while, and I'm gonna give it a go again. Especially as I eat way more carbs than I used to. So I think it is time again to see exactly what's going on. So I'm going to be checking out everything that you guys do at Signos. Tell people where they can find you and everything they sort of need to know.
Yes, please. So if you come to signos.com, signos.com, you'll be able to select the plan that is the best fit for you based on how long you want to be on Signos, and generally it pertains to where you are in your journey. But you go there, you click shop now, and you can purchase it, and it's delivered right to your door.
Awesome. Sharam, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.